Okay, members of the committee, I believe I've got 1 p.m. I know everybody's busy, so we will go ahead and get started, and I would, yeah, well, we're not voting today, so you'll get your chance, but I'm sure it's been noted your enthusiasm. Yeah, we won't put it in the record, but we know it. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask Representative Williams, he opens us up with a word of prayer, would you, please?
Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of this day. We just ask your blessings on our families, Father, and we just ask for your wisdom as we decide matters that affect the people of this state. Bless, guide, and keep us. In Christ's name, amen.
Thanks, sir. Okay, as a reminder to the committee, we are holding a hearing only today on Senate Bill 134, and we have Senator Schaefer here to explain his measure, and you'll have opportunities to ask him questions if he wants to take them after he makes his presentation. So, Senator Schaefer, if you're ready, then I believe I've got your table mic on.
Senate Bill 134, it's my pleasure to present to you. For some time, I've been concerned about the low rate of personal savings in this country. There's polling data that shows 40% of the people in the country couldn't pay a $400 emergency expense without either selling an asset or borrowing money. And I think we need to be trying to do everything that we can to encourage savings. An idea that I have been looking at and that I've drawn into a bill is the idea of allowing our financial institutions, our banks and credit unions, to offer what are called savings promotional raffles. The idea really came from Great Britain. Their savings bond program, which is called the lottery bond program, doesn't actually pay interest. The bonds that you buy don't pay interest, but each bond that you buy enters you into the national British drawing, and there are multi-million-dollar prizes for those who buy the lottery bonds. And what this bill would simply do is allow our financial institutions to offer savings accounts that either in lieu of or in addition to paying interest would also offer the opportunity to win prizes. There's many people with low income invest a substantial chunk of their money each week buying lottery tickets or entering the at the end, the way this thing is structured, for each incremental deposit that someone made to one of these accounts, they'd be entered into a drawing that was set up by the bank. And most people will lose the drawing, just like most people lose the lottery. But at the end, when they lose the lottery, they still have their savings. And there's been 21 other states allow this, and there's been some surprising data. The first year that Michigan allowed these prize-linked savings accounts or these savings promotion raffles, 11 credit unions offered them. And $8.6 million was saved in these accounts. And they found that $1.5 million of that money came from people who had never had a savings account before. And so I do think it does provide an incentive to people who've not saved before to save money, and I think that's something we ought to try to encourage. And I commend this idea to your committee for your consideration. I worked with the Georgia Banking Association, the Community Bankers of Georgia, and the Georgia Credit Union affiliates in putting together the bill. They're all supportive. The United Way of Greater Atlanta and several anti-poverty groups in Atlanta have endorsed the bill as well, and encourage your consideration.
Okay. Let's see. And I never can tell who's 14. Was that? Oh, Representative Mitchell.
Yeah. Senator Schaefer, thank you so very much. Let me just ask you, the actual savings, would it continue to be FDIC insured?
So these would all be FDIC insured institutions, and yes, the savings deposits would be like any other savings deposit. But in lieu of or in addition to earning interest, you would also be entered into periodic raffles or prize drawings.
In lieu of, the interest, the actual interest on their savings would be entered into this raffle?
Well, I mean, the bill's permissive, and it allows the bank to structure whatever sort of program it wants. The reality is that in this low interest environment, most savings accounts don't pay any interest at all, or a rate that's almost zero anyway. In a higher interest environment, it would be easier for the bank to take part of what you would normally pay as interest and put it into a pool. And obviously, the more people who invested in these types of accounts, the larger the pool would.
And one last question, Mr. Chairman. And presumably, if it's in lieu of the interest, they could lose everything but the amount that
They
they're
can't lose
saving.
anything. So for each incremental deposit they make, they would get an entry into the prize drawing. But if they lose the prize drawing, and most people lose prize drawings, at the end, instead of having a worthless lottery ticket or betting slip or the warm glow of a slot machine, you have the savings deposit that you made.
Representative Deffenbaugh, I believe, has a question.
Yes, Senator, if I may ask, how, with the statistics you have read to us about how much money they have saved, how often do these people withdraw their money after they figure they've lost?
I don't have data on that. It will be up to each bank or financial institution to structure the account however they want. If I were a banker and I was offering this account, I would probably grant a drawing for each incremental deposit on deposit for a period of time, so that you don't have the problem of people, depositing right beforehand or withdrawing afterwards. But I don't think that's been a problem. I don't know exactly how the accounts have been structured in other states, but that's not a problem that's been reported.
I'm sure it wouldn't be if they're trying to do this. But I'm really curious as to how long it would be before these people would take it out of it. It's a 90-day stay. After 90 days, is it gone again? Because if people can't pay a $400 bill and they deposit $100 in this, where'd they get the $100?
I believe, look, we sold $2 billion worth of lottery tickets last year, and I imagine a lot of those lottery tickets were purchased by people who are not big savers. And this sort of simulates the thrill of winning a lottery, but instead of having a worthless lottery ticket at the end of the transaction, you have the savings deposit. And I think there's an incentive to keep the savings on deposit because it enters you into additional and subsequent, savings raffle promotions.
Thank you.
Representative Marin, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Schaefer, good seeing you. When we talk about raffles and we talk about prices, can you elaborate? And I know that each institution might be different as what they're going to be giving out, but the concept of raffle prices, can you elaborate? There will be cash raffles, will be prices, toaster oven, or
It would be. I would anticipate that it would be cash. That's what would draw the savings deposits. I use the term savings promotion raffles because the federal regulators have authorized banks to offer that type of product. So I use that term because it's a term of art. Some other states use prize-linked savings accounts, but it would be a drawing for cash money. If a bank or financial institution wanted to offer it.
Okay.
And the banks and credit unions have indicated to me that they have members, or their associations have indicated to me that they have members who are interested in offering this type of product.
Mr. Chair, can I do a follow-up? Senator Schaefer, so it will be cash prices. So it will be on basis of how much you deposit. For example, the bank is going to give out $1,000, just supposedly $1,000. But if I put $100 just on my savings account, I'm eligible for that drawing, or it's a max cash for a higher price. If you deposit little, your price is going to be. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. So look, I'm not in the banking business, but I would imagine that if we had a $1,000 prize, we would, perhaps we would say for every $10 that you've had on deposit for 30 days, then you get one entry into that $1,000 prize, and so that creates an incentive for people to put $100 in there and get 10 drawings, and to keep that $100 in there so they get another 10 drawings the next time there's a cash prize. So the cash prize would obviously come from the bank, from interest that they would otherwise pay, and I have no idea. Banks are going to offer accounts that they believe will attract deposits, and so I don't know how large the prizes will be. If you take in Michigan, where they collected $8.6 million in the first year, what's 1% of $8.6 million? Is that 86,000? So if they, or 10% would be 860,000, so 1%. So you could, if, now, in this low interest rate environment, it's probably not 1%, but you could, with $86 million in deposits, if you were paying a couple of percent interest, and we're moving back in that, you could take 1% of that, offer it as an $86,000 prize or a series of smaller prizes, and see if that attracts any additional savings activity.
Thank you for bringing this bill up. It's a good bill. Thank you.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schaefer, thank you so much for bringing this. I know that this is merely an incentive program to get people to save.
Right.
That's all it really is. And I'm a member of 2 credit unions, and we do an annual raffle. That's the term you want to use. I prefer you use that word raffle instead of lottery, because that's not what it is. And that's an incentive for us to put money into. You win it, you get it put into your savings account. So I understand that. So the question I have is, does this pertain to all savings account? Because we have different savings accounts. I have a savings account for my grandson. So if it's just a savings account, it doesn't matter who it's for. There's no age limit on it or any of that. It's just a savings account, correct?
Yeah, so this would not require any financial institution to do anything, but it would give them the opportunity to offer a new type of account. And so, probably you've got more than one choice of savings account at your institution. You've got a money market account with different requirements, or a regular savings, or maybe it's a different set of terms for a custodial savings account for a child. This would just allow them to would give them the regulatory certainty they need to offer an additional product that would have this prize component. And people could choose to deposit money into it or not.
And the advertisement part of it, they will probably promote it either with some type of signage there or something probably inserted into the monthly report statement that you get, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schaefer, thank you again for bringing this bill. And as I recall, last year in Senate rules, I had a little measure in there that was there to encourage people to save money for their own children's college savings account.
Right.
And it was I appreciate your help in getting that out of the Senate Rules Committee.
Sure.
As I see this bill, what you're trying to do is provide a tool in the toolbox for different banking institutions. This is not going to require that they offer a raffle system. It's not going to change. If I like the banking system, to coin a phrase, and if I like the bank account I have, I can keep my bank account. But what you're doing is trying to make it permissive where we will allow them to offer a raffle system. Do I understand that correctly?
You understand that correctly. But my real goal is to get more people to save more money.
Right, to the point of the 529 plan from last year. So, I guess as I see this, this is. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that this is not requiring anything of any bank. This is just simply giving them a tool. And so, I guess my question would be, I guess because of the way our current code is structured, they can't offer these currently. Or is this to make it explicitly clear that they can, so they clear up that ambiguity?
In this environment, most financial institutions seek regulatory certainty.
Okay.
And this puts in code that this is something that they can do, and I think it gives them the comfort to offer it. There frankly has been more interest expressed by the credit unions in offering this than the regular banks, but both banking associations asked me to include allowing them to offer this account because they did have some interest among their members.
All right, well, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
We're just having a hearing today.
Oh, we're having a hearing. Well, I'm sorry to get ahead of you then.
But you're on the record for that too. So with the senator here, I'm sure he'll remember your eagerness. Okay. Senator Hawkins, Representative Hawkins and Senator.
I just want to hear a little more about the warm glow of the slot machine.
Yeah.
We're going to put these in banks. It sounds like a Ron Stevens bill. Have you been talking to Representative Ron Stevens on this?
Listen, I do think that there's a thrill to winning a prize.
Sure.
That causes many people to buy more lottery tickets than they probably should buy on their budgets. And If we can divert some of those lottery ticket purchases into savings accounts, I think that's good for them, it's good for our society. And I've talked to the lottery, and they have no objection to the bill. They don't believe this will be a competition to what they're trying to accomplish, but I do think it helps
Well,
people.
we may actually have people visiting banks once again with this idea. It's not a bad one. Thank you. Good bill.
Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of the bill, thank you for letting us consider this measure. But the point of order, is it not true that FDIC does not insure credit unions?
That's correct. They have a separate federal fund that insures.
It's fun to catch a senator every now and then in a misstatement.
They are federally insured, but it's by a different fund, correct.
It's actually not the federal government.
Is it not backed by the full faith and credit of the country?
Now, that's a different story.
Okay.
But I don't think it is either. The FDIC's not. So anyhow, maybe implied, but we're not going down that road right now. But in all seriousness, you know, as parents, one of my heaviest obligations to my 4 sons is teaching about good stewardship. And it does give me pause to hear you say the thrill, because obviously there's a thrill of winning any kind of sport or any other competition. But when we're talking about financial matters, isn't it true that you could be sending the wrong signal to our young people and have them motivated for the wrong reasons to use accounts like this? Is that not true?
That's a legitimate argument, and I think we had one dissenting vote in the Senate on this bill, and I think the concern was that this looked too much like, you know, gambling for his tastes.
And a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. In that same vein, is it not true that right now there is no requirement that a child be of a certain age to open a banking account in Georgia?
That's correct.
But thank you for offering that flexibility to the financial institutions if they choose to use it.
I believe next is Representative Ridley. You have a
Senator, how you?
question?
I have been in the banking business, so I understand completely. Is it not true that the average savings account draws less than 0.6% interest?
I think now that's correct.
Okay. So this is when I was in banking, we'd do, if you deposited in to a savings account, we'd put $100 after 6 months. So your money was in there for 6 months because the FDIC makes you take that block of money and hold it for so long. So with this here, what you're really doing, you could either get a cash prize or you could get a higher interest rate if you win. So it's fair across the board to everybody.
Right.
I think people get a little lost in the weeds on this thing because it's a so-called lottery. But I feel like that this is a good product because when you're talking about getting 0.6% on your money, I mean, it's not really worth enough putting it in there, you know. And so I think this right here would get more people to save. And I know the banks used to, the overnight funds, they used to draw a little interest, and the bond rates went down so low it was actually costing them money. So I think this would actually help out the community banks a whole lot by, you know, being able to not have to pay that much interest and have a chance to pay, you know, the person have an opportunity to gain more interest on that. So I appreciate you bringing the bill.
I appreciate that. And as I look at my notes, which I should have done a better job reviewing before I sat down, in answer to Representative Deffenbaugh's question, 80% of the people who open these accounts renew them. So there's maybe a 20% rate of people that are entering and then withdrawing, but 80% are building on their savings, you know, which is the goal.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supposed to, well, you're 23, right?
All right, got it.
Okay.
Senator, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I've got sort of a multi-part question. Senator, thank you. As a long in the tooth banker, I do have a few questions about this. To follow up on Representative Williamson's question about the age issue, as we understand it currently, there is no age limit in Georgia for opening accounts. I believe the banking department's housekeeping bill has a 16-year-old number in it, subject to the financial institution. So as I understand it, if that bill is signed into law and this bill is signed into law, someone 16 could go in, open up a banking account, and basically be playing the lottery. I don't think we allow 16-year-olds to buy lottery tickets. So just a thought there about whether or not, if that bill supersedes this one, whether or not we might ought to have an age cutoff here. Just a question, food for thought.
If in the wisdom of the committee, you wanted to put in an age limitation for non-custodial accounts, I would have no objection to that at all.
The other question I have is sort of a philosophical question. You indicated you had worked with the banking associations and the credit union association. I know that for years the financial services community in Georgia has worked in schools and other venues teaching financial responsibility, and one of the things that we have always taught is sort of the magic of compound interest and showing young people how that process works. And again, your bill encourages them to save the principal. It really doesn't do much as far as growth. Were there any discussions when you were formulating the bill about any heartburn or whatnot about whether or not we might be sending mixed messages, if you will, about that issue?
I think that that's a legitimate question. I think that there's, as you know from being in the banking industry, there's frustration at the low interest rate environment. You cannot teach the magic of compounding when my Bank of America account pays 0.01% interest on savings. There's no magic there at all. And so and again, this is not an idea that the banks or the credit unions brought me. It was I've been thinking about things we can do to encourage savings, and I took it to them and asked them if they wanted to be in or not, and they indicated they would like to be in.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, one follow-up. A technical question. I believe some years ago in the state of Georgia, we passed a law that says that anybody that conducts a raffle, whether it's the local booster club or whatnot, has to get an annual permit from the local sheriff's office to conduct a raffle. To your knowledge, would banks and credit unions be subject to that?
Not the way the bill's structured. No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, banks are heavily regulated as is, and we didn't put any additional regulations on them.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Senator Schaefer. You just answered one of the questions, was who brought the idea forward? Was it the industry coming to you, and you had brought this good idea forward to the industry? Was there conversation about the unintended consequences of maybe creating competition amongst the banks outside of their normal business practice, where one bank could offer a lucrative, just based on their needs of a certain branch or a certain region, $1,000 lottery versus which would be an abnormal business, venture for them versus 10, and that kind of shifts funds around. Did you run into any of that conversation? And maybe if the industry wanted to input or comment on that, I'd be interested.
That was never raised with me. Perhaps they've got that was never raised with me. I mean, I would imagine, if I were a banker and I had a multi-branch bank, I would probably have a single drawing, because it would have a larger prize, and that would likely attract more deposits. But they'd be free to structure it however they wanted under the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Teasley, stimulated this afternoon. Go right ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We're having this discussion about, does this send a mixed message? Does this encourage lottery-like behavior? But I want to get your perspective on this. I know in various aspects of my life, whether it be my marriage or whatever else, that sometimes doing the right thing, getting in the habit of doing the right thing, is what I need to be doing in the first place. So there are times, can't believe I'm saying this over recording, there are times I might bring flowers to my wife even though I don't feel like it, because it's the right thing to do. I communicate to her that I love her, and frankly, those feelings tend to follow my action. And so, as I'm not asking you to comment on my romance here, but wouldn't you agree that getting people in the habit of putting money in bank accounts far outweighs any concern that we might be teaching lottery-like behavior?
No, I mean, savings ought to be a habit that we encourage. And I honestly don't think this encourages lottery-like behavior. There were $70 billion worth of lottery tickets bought last year. I mean, the lottery-like behavior has been stimulated. This is an attempt to use that to get some of the money diverted into into a product that will help secure the families of those who are participating in the lottery.
That current has carried over to Representative Donahue. So
There you go.
if you've got a question, you proceed.
Thank you again for bringing this bill. I would encourage you, though, to look at the ages and try to let it start at birth. For instance, each one of our children, we started a $500 savings account. With our grandchildren, we did the same thing. As they're 6, 7, 8 years old, what started happening was they started taking change and putting it in a little can, started taking that money to the bank. And as they were older, they started realizing, this money adds up because it's a repetition continuously of them doing that. And every year, they would take, it might have been $37 as they earned money, cutting grass, whatever, they continuously put it in there. Now they're married, our grandchildren, we have the same process. So thank you for bringing that. And if I want to be on the record, should I say at the proper time, even though we're not voting, just to be on the record? But
Seems to be
I do
the
thank you for
jour.
that.
Okay, all right. Are there any more questions for Senator Schaefer on his bill? Senators, thank you for coming.
very much.
And I'm
Appreciate
glad
your
you're feeling better. And thank you, committee members, very good questions, very thorough. And with that, if there's nothing else, we'll be adjourned.